So your goal is to drop your blood sugar as fast as you can, get it into normal ranges. This is the video for you. And it doesn't matter whether or not you're a type 1 or you're type 2 diabetic. Some of these tips I can guarantee that you've never heard of before, and they're gonna help you to really get better control over your blood sugars, drive the blood sugar down fast. This is probably one of the most important videos that you can watch to help to control your blood sugars. Stick around to the end. I'm gonna drop the most important point at the end of this video because it's gonna help to tie everything together. If it's your first time on the channel, I'm a diabetic fitness coach and I help diabetics to control their blood sugars and transform their bodies. But even if you're not diabetic, but you also like things like supplement reviews to help you take your fitness and your health to the next level, smash the subscribe button down below, hit that bell notification, and also smash the like button too. It just helps me get these videos out. So the most important thing that we can overcome is insulin resistance. When we think about insulin resistance, this is really inflammation in the body. If we can overcome inflammation in the body and help the body respond better, we can help to drive the blood sugars down faster and we can eliminate things like insulin resistance. So the first thing I want to talk about is artificial sweeteners and things like maltodextrin that might be in some of the foods that you're eating. Now at first bet, if you're diabetic, you're thinking, I'm having an artificial sweetener, which is great. These are also called NASs, which stands for non-caloric artificial sweetener, meaning we go for them because it seems like they're not going to spike our blood sugars. It's also not going to spike our calories. But down the line, it's been shown that things like artificial sweeteners can impact how our body is able to absorb glucose and how insulin also responds to glucose that's in our blood. And how this impacts the glucose that's in our blood is done by its manipulation of our gut microbiome. Changing the gut microbiome, this can actually impact our body's ability to shuttle glucose into our body cells. These metabolites in our gut microbiome is just the bacteria that live within our bodies and mainly our intestines. And this gut microbiome can really help our body when it comes to absorbing glucose. In one article in particular in the Journal of Nature and Communications, here we demonstrate that the consumption of commonly used NAS, it stands for non-caloric artificial sweeteners, formulations drives the development of glucose intolerance through the induction of compositional and functional alterations to the intestinal microbiota, or changes in your gut microbiome that are causing your body not to utilize glucose the best way possible, which can cause your body to have a little bit more glucose issues in terms of how it's absorbed. Artificial sweeteners can disrupt this balance that happens, which can directly influence how glucose is metabolized in your body. This study was done in the Journal of Family Medicine and Primary Care, and what they say is the ingestion of these artificial sweeteners results in the release of insulin from the pancreas, which is mistaken for glucose due to their sweet taste. This increases the levels of insulin in the blood, eventually leading to decreased receptor activity due to insulin resistance. If you're somebody who is a type 2 diabetic and you're trying to get this under control, then you can, by using artificial sweeteners, you're seeing how not only can this interrupt your microbiome, which also impacts type 1 diabetics because they still got to inject the insulin, but also you're seeing that it can still cause these spikes of insulin that over time, if you're someone who's thinking that I'm just gonna go ahead and belt out all of these low carbohydrate drinks that just are sweetened with artificial sweeteners, then you're still winding up putting yourself in a situation which can cause more insulin resistance. An article done in the Association Between Artificial Sweeteners and Obesity in the Journal of Nutrition and Obesity, and what they came to conclusion was artificial sweeteners appear to change the host microbiome, lead to a decrease in satiety in terms of how you feel fullness, and alter glucose homeostasis, and are associated with increased caloric consumption and weight gain. Key thing there is glucose homeostasis in terms of how we balance glucose and a change in your microbiome, which are leading to this glucose homeostasis that's being thrown out the window. There are numerous studies that do talk about artificial sweeteners that we might be using, and I bring this up too because maybe you have a protein bar or a protein shake that you're using that's not the cleanest, that's causing you to have spikes in your blood sugar that maybe you didn't notice before. But now that you see how some of these additives, some of these artificial sweeteners that are being added to some of the foods that you might be eating could be interfering with your blood sugar and causing these spikes. Eliminating some of the foods that have some of these artificial sweeteners, you might notice that you have better control over your blood sugars. You're driving the blood sugar down faster. Another thing to keep in mind is a component called maltodextrin. Maltodextrin is a starch, but maltodextrin can cause your blood sugar to spike really high because of its high glycemic index. So if you have a supplement like a protein bar or you're eating something that has maltodextrin in it, Now, what you might notice initially is you're like, okay, it's showing me the carbohydrate information, but maltodextrin, because it's a starch, is usually added into that carbohydrate information. And so you might not even notice it has almost double the glycemic index of table sugar, which has a glycemic index, or sucrose, which has a glycemic index of about 65. Maltodextrin has a glycemic index of around 135. So you're seeing that you're more than double what the glycemic index is of table sugar. And the glycemic index just measures how fast your blood sugar is going to spike when you eat in certain foods. And so if you can imagine, you're wondering, why is my blood sugar spiking after having this protein bar that only has 20 grams of carbohydrates in it? It's got protein, it's got some fiber in it, but it also has maltodextrin, which could be causing those spikes in your blood sugar as well. And so if this is happening to you, let's say you're type 1, you might have to give yourself a little bit more insulin. Or if we're specifically talking about improving insulin sensitivity, then having foods that spike your blood sugar constantly like that might not be good in the long run for improving that insulin sensitivity. And they might just be driving some of the insulin resistance, even if you're a type 1 diabetic as well. And so avoiding some of these foods and finding more that have more natural sweeteners in them, maybe like monk fruit, for example, could potentially help your body to avoid some of these issues that happen. Another thing that's not talked about a lot is training, and how training can help to drive your blood sugar down. You've got two main energy systems, but we can break this down into three parts. So you've got your anaerobic system, meaning without oxygen, and your aerobic system, meaning with oxygen, meaning we use more oxygen, more fats to drive and create what's called ATP, which is your body's energy molecule, so that can fuel your workout. But when you're in the anaerobic system without oxygen, usually your system is going to require mainly glucose, which is the breaking down carbohydrates for the food that we eat, to transform that into energy. And so think about anaerobic training or things like high intensity sprints. Strength training, for example, 6+ reps in a set. Your body's mainly gonna switch systems to be able to use more of that anaerobic system to power you through that workout. The higher the intensity and the longer you're going with that workout, the more your body's gonna drive glucose down fast. And so if you could imagine someone who's doing sprints as hard as they can go for 100 meters and then resting for 30 seconds to a minute and repeating that 15 times, they are going to be exhausted, just as an example, and they're going to drive that glucose down a lot faster than someone that might be doing strength training and now they have some rest breaks in between their sets, they can relax. That glucose is not going to drive down as fast, right? So the higher the intensity, the longer the duration of that, the faster the glucose is going to drive down, especially when you're talking about the anaerobic training. That's going to drive glucose down a lot faster, you know, than somebody who's going for a walk for 2 hours, right? Because it's very low, and that walk would be more seen as aerobic training, and the body's not gonna use as much glucose out of the system. So still utilize glucose, and it's still gonna be good, but in terms of if you wanna drive it down fast, think about how the intensity of your workout spread over the course of the duration of it can lead to a drive. Now, you might be saying, Jason, my blood sugar does spike sometimes when I'm training. And yes, that does happen. And this goes down to a few things in terms of how much carbohydrates you eat in a day, how much did you eat before your workout, because that can get stored as glycogen, which through the release of cortisol and adrenaline as you train, that can then cause your body to have that spike. But the longer you play it out, you're gonna exhaust eventually that glucose and it will start to come down. So you might get an initial hit from explosive workouts that causes an initial spike, but over time, as long as you're continuing that training style, it can bring that blood sugar back down as well over time. Disclaimer is that everybody's body is still slightly different, and so it's important for you to find the patterns that work best for you and make adjustments based on that, even though I'm just breaking down the foundation of how the body works in these different energy systems. Now, another thing I want to say is extremely powerful for helping to drive the blood sugar down is fasting. Fasting is probably one of the most overlooked things, and if you're diabetic, the chances are you've probably heard that you shouldn't fast. Diabetics need to eat every single hour all the time to get their blood sugar stable, and unfortunately this can wind up having a situation of more insulin resistance. The reason being is because when we fast, it has powerful changes in the body which allow the body to function better and utilize glucose more effectively, improving insulin sensitivity and actually reducing insulin resistance. 16-hour fasts or more are really going to help to improve that insulin sensitivity in your body. It allows your body to breathe. If you can imagine going to a concert and all you hear is music all the time and it sounds great, you're having fun, but what if you never left? Or what if you only left for an hour and came back every single day? Eventually it's gonna blow your eardrums, you're gonna have a hard time. And that's our body in today's society, thinking we have to eat all the time, square meals throughout the day, breakfast, lunch, dinner, dinner, snacks. And all that's doing is causing spike of insulin. Even if you're a type 1 diabetic, injection, dose. And the body never really has that period of time to rest, to breathe, to bring things back to a state of balance. On top of it too, some of these adaptations include things like apoptosis and autophagy. Autophagy just means clearing out cells, worn out parts of your cells in your body to allow them to function better. Also think of something like your mitochondria, which are the energy powerhouses of your body. And so even when we think of insulin resistance, you might be in a situation where your body is responding to some of the insulin, the glucose gets into the cells, but the mitochondria then, which are responsible for helping with the process of what's called glycolysis, which is just to break down more of that glucose to then convert it to energy within your cell. If this is not working properly, can still lead to issues where glucose is not being utilized the best way possible for energy, which can also impact your body's energy. And so by you not only fasting to improve insulin sensitivity and reduce insulin resistance, you also help the inside of the cell when the glucose gets into the cell to help mitochondria, the energy powerhouses of the cell, to convert the glucose you're eating to ATP, the energy molecule of our body. And really what you're doing, just like in exercise, essentially what exercise and fasting does is allow your GLUT4 responder inside your cell. Imagine GLUT4 as the person who's responding to the door. Insulin is the person that's gonna show up at your door, knock on your door to give you glucose. Now, there's somebody on the inside of the house, call that GLUT4. Now, if you have insulin resistance, GLUT4 isn't responding as good, so it doesn't hear the knock on the door from insulin. And so by exercising and by fasting, you allow that person to hear the knock at the door better, to open it up to allow glucose that our person at the door is bringing inside of the house. This can help to drive the blood sugars down a lot faster, especially when we practice fasting consistently over time. And there's actually a study done here. It's called Early Time Restricted Feeding Improves Insulin Sensitivity, Blood Pressure, and Oxidative Stress even without weight loss in men with prediabetes. And even though this focuses in on men, there's also studies that show women improving insulin sensitivity by fasting as well. You have a lot of weight on your body, you have a lot of insulin resistance. And if you drop the weight, you drop the insulin resistance. But what this is showing is fasting can actually help to improve insulin resistance regardless of whether there was weight loss or not. What they had people on was more of an 18-hour fast and eating for 6, and they cut off eating at 3 p.m. And so that way, as you release more cortisol in the evening, which release more glucose in the system overnight, that's also known as the dawn phenomenon effect, they cut that off, and that really helped to balance blood sugars out, along with just the extended fast they were doing throughout the day. And what they mentioned was early time release fasting, improved insulin sensitivity, B cell responsiveness. So if your body is still producing insulin, B cells from the body, beta cells are releasing more insulin, blood pressure, oxidative stress, and appetite. We demonstrate for the first time in humans that ETRF, early time release fasting, improves some aspects of cardiometabolic health, your heart health, and intermittent fasting's effects are not solely due to weight loss. And so as you guys can see, there's just so much powerful stuff we can accomplish with fasting consistently over time to reset the body, improve insulin sensitivity as well, so that you guys can drive those blood sugars down fast. No matter what I say, no matter what I do, find your body's patterns and be mindful about what you are noticing. When you're mindful, this is gonna allow you to really dive deep and find your patterns.